Hello, Stormworkers! Welcome to my tutorial series, Stormworks Bootcamp. I am Forge Builder. I have about 1,400 hours on this game, and I'm still not that great, but I want to, for all you beginners out there, share with you my passion for this game and how you build stuff in it. Because I think that there's a lot of good tutorials out there that make you some pretty cool vehicles, but don't get to the point in teaching you the concepts of the game. This series of videos serves to teach you how to play Stormworks by understanding how components work instead of just guiding you through building a simple vehicle. I started by using these tutorials, and that didn't really help me. Fooling around and just doing stuff, I made these little lab vehicles to just learn how the game worked, and that's how I learned, and that's still how I learn how to get better at this game. Learning the math and the concepts that make those vehicles is how you get good at this game. So I've got a lot of concepts to cover, but today we're going to start with not just the editor, but also just getting a basic setup to go off of in the game. So when you first boot up Stormworks, the first thing you're going to want to do is the game will probably force you to do the tutorial. Get out of that as soon as you can. The tutorial is not helpful. The tutorial teaches you how to play the campaign. The tutorial does not teach you how to build vehicles. So what you're going to want to do is as soon as you have the option, you're going to go to New Game. You're going to set the game mode to Custom. Custom is going to give you unlimited money, and it's going to spawn you in a location that has a lot better workbenches. So the starter area confines you to making like a tiny rescue raft. These areas will let you build whatever you want. So that's why you want to do custom and also the unlimited money. You're going to want to go to enabled add-ons and you're going to hit toggle all because every single one of these add-ons is going to lag your game. Over time, they will create memory leaks, which will lower the TPS and make the physics look terrible. There's no reason to have all of these add-ons on. So you're just going to turn them all off. Enabled mods, this doesn't matter for you right now. If you've got DLCs, pick the ones you want. I personally like these two. I don't really like space, but that is completely up to you. This doesn't really matter. I like to set my seed to 0 for no reason in particular. There's really no reason you need to do that. So yeah, we're going to start. Okay, so when you spawn in, the first thing that I like to do is, if I'm booting up Stormworks on a new computer, is I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to go to settings, and I'm going to go to controls, and I'm going to search for where it says no clip. So no clip right here is usually bound to home. I like to bind it to T because T isn't used for anything else, and it's pretty accessible. What no clip allows you to do is when you hit it, well, you no clip if you've used no clip in any other game before. And so you can use shift to go faster, you can use control to go slower, if you can use alt to go really fast. If you do shift and alt, you will go extremely fast, but I'm not going to do that right now because that's a different hotkey on my computer that'll mess some stuff up. And you're going to want to go over to one of these workbenches. Another thing that I have set up in my hotkeys, or in my controls, in my keybinds, that you guys might want to do, is E and Q are used for interact. I've changed those to the 2 side buttons on my mouse, because most of the time that you're going to be using E and Q is a moment that really could be a mouse click. And also, vehicles have the ability to take inputs from your arrow keys, but I like to have my arrow keys rebound to Q, E, and R, F, so that I can do all of those inputs with one hand. There's benefits and ill benefits for doing this, so that's really up to how you want to build your vehicles. If you're going to be using mouse aim in your vehicle, then your right hand is going to be on your mouse, and you're going to want to have QE and RF controlling your vehicle. But if you don't intend on touching your mouse at all, and you want to be able to do inputs for WASD and arrow keys at the same time, then you're probably going to want to leave it as is. That said, rebinding QE to the side mouse buttons, I think, is a really convenient, nice thing to do, regardless of whether you move your arrow keys or not. Something else that is important to note is when you hit escape, you can go to custom menu here, and you've got a whole bunch of options that are going to make building easier. So you can override the weather, you can override the time, you can set it to whatever time you want. You can change the duration if you care, but usually I just like to override and set it to a certain time where it's spread out. You can make it so that your vehicles don't get damaged. You can make it so that you don't take damage. You can enable infinite electric, infinite fuel, or infinite ammo. You can disable engine overheating once you start making engines if you don't have cooling. These are all really useful for testing your vehicles. Do not make vehicles that are reliant on these, though, once you start to get experienced at the game. These are not play styles, these are crutches. Do not make vehicles that just run on infinite electric and have that be your play style. Like I'm not your dad. I'm not I can't control what you do, but for the love of God, do not do this. So, when we open up the workbench, you get bombarded with a lot of information the first time you boot up the game. So I'm going to walk you through all the different menu buttons. This is the exit button. If you hit exit, the game will save whatever you have here as an autosave, and it'll remember that you've done it. So if I go out of this, if I hit exit, my vehicle is not going to be spawned. But if I go back into the workbench, it's still here. And I can hit spawn if I want to spawn this vehicle in the world, and it'll be right there. If I want to keep working on this vehicle, I can either go over to it, and the keybind for me is B, but it might be something else by default. You're going to hit this keybind, and it'll take it back to the workbench. Or you can go back and interact with the workbench. This one right here, if you just hate what you're working on and don't want to save it, new vehicle, get it out of here. These are the load and save buttons. If you want to save something that you've made and have it for later, you can hit save. You hit the little plus button here. You can give it a name. I'm just going to call this Goober and put a bunch of numbers because I undoubtedly have a creation that's already called Goober. And so then if I go new vehicle, oh no, I destroyed it, or maybe I spawned it in and it got lost in the world, I can go to load right here. This is the workshop button. If you have a creation that you're really proud of, that you've spent hours and hours polishing, that you want to share with the world, or something that you didn't really put any effort into at all, that you actually sometimes even wish you didn't make, Blitz, then you can share it with the world using this. I'm not going to walk through doing this because I actually don't really remember how it works. This is not going to be super important to you until you're at the level that you're making vehicles that you're really proud of. This is the selection tool. This is for changing the properties of different components. So if I have a constant number block and I have it placed down right here, and I go to select, I can click on it, and it's got this nice little properties window. And so I can change the property here, and that will affect the behaviors of the block. Lots of different blocks have their own little menus. And so they'll have a whole bunch of different stuff that you can change. This isn't super important right now, but that's what that button does. Here is your paint. When you hit paint, you're going to get a thing come up on the side where you can select all of these different colors. You can paint stuff. You've got different modes. Brush just paints like a brush. Additive, I have never used this in my life. Replace color replaces everything that's that color. And plane fill, one of my personal favorites, just does a single plane. The rules for what counts as a plane are, it's any surface that's planar, but it's kind of iffy. It's really useful. And also if you want to make your own custom color, you can give it raw RGB values, and then you can save it to any one of these slots, like that. This is the move tool. If you want to move your creation around so that it spawns in a different place in the world space. If you've got like some very specific stuff in your workbench where you need it to spawn a specific area, you can use world view down here to actually see where your vehicle is going to spawn. and you can position it like that. This is the logic menu. This is one of the most important things in Stormworks, because unlike some other games that have you build vehicles, none of the logic in this game is default. You program everything. So maybe I want to have a seat, and I want to have a motor, and I want to have the seat control the motor. What I'm going to do is, let's see, let's put a big wheel on here. Yeah, that's funny. So, I can drag right here. WS, this is going to be a number between 1 and -1, depending on how long I've been pressing W, how long I've been pressing S, and then also some stuff in the config here that we can learn about in a later episode. So then this connection means that this small dot is the source of the number. This is where the information is being generated. And this open circle is where it's going. So you always go from the dots to the open circles. And so I can have trigger, which is space when I'm in this seat. I can drag that to brake for when I want it to stop. And of course, also, you're going to need power anytime you're going to be doing something like this. So you're going to have to, from the logic menu, right, data, you've got on-off signals and number signals. Composite is complicated. Electric, everything needs to be electrically connected. There needs to be a power source for things that take power. Video, there are cameras and monitors in this game. Audio, I have personally never used in my life. And rope, you can use rope anchors, and I just place 2 of them here, and I draw a connection between them. When I spawn in the vehicle, I'm no-clipping over here to be a little faster. I just use T there. That's why we like that. There is now a rope between these, which I can pick up, and I can drop on the ground, and I can put back on. If I get in this seat, you'll remember that when we were in the logic menu, we hooked up W and S to that little motor. So if I hold down W, you'll see this wheel starts to spin, and then when I let go, it starts to slow down, and if I hit space, it'll stop, because that's what I connected brake to. Here's another important menu. This is the merge menu. So in Stormworks, your vehicle is made of several different subgrids. If you take something like a pivot and place it down, you can open up the merge menu and see that these are 2 different separate physics bodies. So if something is on a different physics body, then they can move somewhat independently. This pivot is keeping the green part attached to the red part in a way that it can spin, but these are 2 different physics objects, and you can tell by the color. Now, if I actually decide that I don't like this pivot, and I want them to be part of the same thing, I can go to the merge menu, I can click one of them, and I can click the other, and it'll merge them together. But you'll notice I just used Control-Z. Things like Control-Z and Control-Y you can use in Stormworks to undo and redo. If I place them like this, you can see these are now 2 separate things. I can merge them together. But if I have these 2 and I try and merge them together, it won't let me, because the bottom and top of a pivot cannot be merged together. So if it's making this weird sound, here. If it makes that weird sound, it's telling you that there's something preventing those 2 things from being connected. This is the selection grid. The selection grid is incredibly useful for many different types of editing operations on your vehicle. So you can move around your grid like this. You can resize it. And anything that is in this grid, when you hit cut, can then be moved. And when you hit paste, there's also the other nice option to have, this is now a separate thing. When you cut something and move it with the selection tool, it's a separate thing. So I can now merge these back together. And also, this is still on my clipboard, so I can place it down again. Note that when you paste something down twice, the logic connections won't be there, because you can see the logic here. This little circle, this closed circle, this tiny circle, can only go to 1 open circle. So I can have this go to multiple different nodes, but I can't have multiple different inputs. You see, it cancels the other one. Cancels it out. And then finally, the microcontroller editor. Microcontrollers are one of the most useful things in Stormworks for logic, and they unlock unlimited possibilities with how smart you want to make your vehicles. This is going to be a separate video. It's got its own whole thing up at the top. If you accidentally go in here and you don't know what you're doing, back, get out of there. You're doing great. On the side, we've got symmetry. So we can have symmetry on one axis at a time. We've got X, Y, Z. So if I have the X-axis right here, you can see it copies what I do on both sides. The selection grid is not affected by symmetry. So if you start doing stuff with selection grid, it's not going to be copied on both sides. You can, if this isn't in the center of your vehicle, you can show hide this movement widget and you can move the symmetry around if you want to do symmetry in a specific place or if it's just not lined up with the center of your vehicle. I usually like to use symmetry when I'm first making the hull of my creations, but then I usually turn it off. Section plane. If you've got a vehicle that's really big and complicated and you need to see the inside of it, like, let's say I've got a vehicle with a box here, and I want to look inside without, like, moving my camera in here. Then I'm going to do section plane, and I can drag this around, and I can see inside, and I can place stuff inside. This is really useful for bigger creations. You'll also notice when I right-click, my camera moves around like this. That's because of a specific thing that I've chosen to do. My camera is set to free mode. If you have it in orbit mode, which is the default, your camera will move like this. I don't really like orbit mode because I am always building vehicles where I need to move my camera around very intricately. I need to see the inner workings of it. So I like to use free mode so that I rotate around like this and I can actually use WASD to move. When you are in orbit mode, you can also use WASD to move, but you're not moving, you're moving like the point that you're looking around. So it can get confusing sometimes, which is why I like free mode. The center of mass. A lot of these are just visibility tools, so you can see where the center of mass is that your vehicle is at with this. These direction arrows, these are useful for certain components like wheels. So what this means is that the plus means that if an RPS value, if I give a positive number to this little motor, then it's going to make it spin this way. And if I give it a negative number, it's going to spin this way. If I give the wheel, if I give it a positive number for the steering value, steering right here, then it's going to spin this way. And if I give it a negative value, it's going to spin this way. When you're placing an object, you also have several keybinds for rotating it. So that's going to be K, J, L. These are the rotation ones. And then you can also flip stuff. So that's going to be U, I, and O. If you forget these keybinds or just don't know them, that is what the rotation labels is for. You get these nice little thingies, and they will show you what button corresponds to what action. I have this turned off because I have it memorized, but it is very useful for beginners. Grid lines, yours is going to look like this by default. I had mine off when I started this tutorial. Grid lines are nice for if you want to line stuff up precisely. I usually have it on, but sometimes I'll turn it off if I want to get a better look of what my vehicle is going to look like in world, because this is what it's going to look like when it's actually out in the world. It's not going to have these grid lines on it. You're not stuck with these. Sometimes I like to do that for painting. You've got measurements. Measurements here, if I've got measurements turned off, whenever I go to place something, I'm going to do a different color so you can see. When I go to place something, nothing happens. If I've got measurements on, you can see in the bottom right, there's a little thing that tells me how big the little plate of blocks I'm making is. So each one of these is 25 centimeters. 4 of them is a meter. You can see the red one. and the 0.25 green and the 0.25 blue, and you can see how it shifts when I make it bigger and smaller. That's really useful. And so worldview, we've already looked at this a few times. The final thing in the editor is this editor warnings thing. So editor warnings is for showing you some simple mistakes that you've made with your creation. So like this motor doesn't have a number hooked up to it. So it's mad, input not connected. So it wants me to go ahead and connect WS or any other number input to this throttle value. There's no point having this if there's no input value. There's no point having a motor. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. So thank you.